There are people who believe that after enough years with someone, after enough anniversaries and shared routines and sleepy Sunday mornings, you eventually know everything about them. I used to believe that too. For 6 years, I believed I knew my husband, Adrian Mercer, better than anyone else in the world. I knew he hated olives, but always picked them off pizza and left them in a neat little pile on the edge of his plate. I knew he could never sleep unless there was a fan running somewhere in the room. I knew he always called his mother every Tuesday evening and that he pretended to hate romantic movies even though he cried during every single one. I knew the exact shade his eyes turned when he laughed. Or at least, I thought I did. Adrian and I met at a corporate networking event in Chicago. We worked in similar industries, both of us in international marketing, and we spent half our lives in airports, hotels, and conference rooms. At the party, I had been standing near the buffet trying to decide whether the tiny crab cakes looked edible when someone beside me said, "Those are a trap." I saw 3 people take one and immediately regret it. First looked over and saw a tall man in a navy suit with messy dark hair and an amused smile. "Good to know," I said. "You may have just saved my life." "That's what I'm here for." That was Adrian. By the end of the night, we talked about work, travel, our favorite cities, and the ridiculous number of business people who seemed to think saying synergy made them sound intelligent. 3 weeks later, he took me to dinner. 2 years after that, we got married. For a long time, our life together felt like the kind of relationship people secretly envy. We traveled constantly. Paris, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, Iceland, Greece. We collected passport stamps the way other couples collected fridge magnets. We had our favorite little rituals, finding the best coffee shop in every city, taking blurry selfies in front of landmarks, staying up too late in hotel rooms, eating room service fries, and talking about where we wanted to go next. Whenever people asked me what made our marriage work, I always gave the same answer. We trust each other. The irony of that still makes me sick. The day everything fell apart started like every other ordinary Tuesday. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows. I was sitting at the kitchen island in my pajamas, drinking coffee and half listening to the morning news while Adrian sat across from me with his laptop open. He was frowning at his inbox. "Anything exciting?" I asked. "Just work," he muttered, thrilling. He smiled faintly. A few minutes later, he stood up. "I'm going to shower. Can you order breakfast? I'm starving." "Sure." He left his laptop open on the counter. I had no reason to look at it. I wasn't the jealous type. I had never checked his phone. Never read his messages. Never gone through his things. But I remembered I needed to look up the address of a restaurant my coworker had recommended in Lisbon, and my phone was charging in the bedroom. So I pulled Adrian's laptop toward me. The search bar was still open when an email notification appeared in the corner of the screen. It was from someone named Melissa Carter. The subject line read, "Ethan School Authorization Form." I stared at it. "Ethan?" I frowned and clicked it before I could stop myself. Attached was a PDF from an elementary school in Seattle. At the bottom was a space for father's signature, and next to it, in a digital signature box, was Adrian's name. My heart dropped so suddenly, it felt like missing a step in the dark. Maybe it was work-related, I thought. Maybe Melissa was a coworker. Maybe Ethan was a nephew. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But even as I told myself that, something cold and awful began curling in my stomach. When Adrian came back into the kitchen 20 minutes later, dressed and toweling off his hair, I had already closed the laptop. "Breakfast?" he asked. "I was thinking, maybe you could go pick it up from that cafe downstairs," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm craving their croissant. Done." He leaned down and kissed my forehead. I almost flinched. As soon as the apartment door shut behind him, I opened the laptop again. The password was still saved. I wish I could say I stopped after one email. I didn't. I searched Melissa Carter, hundreds of emails, some recent, some going back years. At first, I could barely understand what I was reading. Doctor appointments, photos, messages about school supplies and birthday parties. There was a receipt for a toy store, another for a pediatric dentist. Then I found the flight confirmations. Every business trip Adrian had taken to Seattle over the past 4 years, every conference, every overnight meeting, every last-minute work emergency, he hadn't been working. He had been visiting them. Melissa and Ethan. I sat frozen in the kitchen, staring at the screen while my coffee went cold beside me. There were photos attached to some of the emails. One of Adrian holding a little boy on his shoulders at a zoo. One of the 3 of them sitting together on a beach. One of Melissa kissing his cheek while Ethan grinned between them. A family. His family. Not mine. I kept digging because some horrible part of me needed to know exactly how bad it was. I found Melissa's social media pages. The first photo I saw nearly made me physically ill. It was from 3 Christmases ago. Adrian stood beside a decorated tree with his arm around Melissa and a little blonde boy in matching pajamas. The caption read, "So grateful for my boys." There were dozens of photos, Halloween costumes, birthday parties, picnics, a Father's Day post. The date stretched back 4 years. 4 years. 4 years of lies. 4 years of him kissing me goodbye at airports and telling me he'd miss me. 4 years of him coming home from work trips and handing me souvenirs while he carried another life around in his pocket. By the time Adrian returned with breakfast, I was sitting on the couch staring blankly at the television. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Are you sure?" "Just tired." He looked at me for a moment, then shrugged and set the food on the table. I watched him move around our kitchen like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just shattered my entire life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the coffee mug at his head. I wanted to grab him by the collar and demand to know how he could do this to me. Instead, I smiled. That was the moment I realized something about betrayal. The person who lies to you for years never expects you to become a liar too. For the next 2 weeks, I acted exactly the same. I laughed at his jokes. I sat beside him on the couch. I kissed him goodbye before work. Every second of it made me want to crawl out of my own skin. But underneath all of that, I was planning. One evening, while we were eating dinner, I casually said, "We haven't taken a real trip together in forever." Adrian looked up. "You're right. What if we did something spontaneous? Like where?" I pretended to think about it. "How about Morocco?" His face lit up instantly. "You've always wanted to go there. I know, and I've never been exactly." He smiled. "Then let's do it," I smiled back. By the end of the night, the trip was booked. 7 days in Marrakech, a luxury hotel, business class flights. Adrian spent the next few weeks talking about everything he wanted to see: the markets, the architecture, the desert. Every time he spoke, I felt a little more hollow. The flight to Morocco was 11 hours long. Adrian slept for most of it with his head resting on my shoulder. At one point, I looked down at him and thought about the man I had fallen in love with. Or maybe not him. Maybe I had loved a version of him that never existed. We arrived in Marrakech just before sunset. The city was beautiful. Warm orange light spilled across the streets. The air smelled like spices and smoke and something sweet I couldn't name. Motorbikes darted through crowded roads. Music drifted from nearby cafes. Adrian looked around with the excitement of a child. "This place is incredible," he said. "It is," I replied. At the hotel, we checked into a suite with a balcony overlooking the city. That first evening, we went out to dinner. Adrian ordered too much wine, then more wine, then whiskey afterward at the hotel bar. By midnight, he was laughing loudly and slurring his words. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you're the best thing that ever happened to me." The sheer nerve of it almost made me laugh. "Really?" I said quietly. "Absolutely." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I let him. When we finally went upstairs, he collapsed onto the bed, still half-dressed. Within minutes, he was asleep. I stood there in the dark hotel room looking at him. My husband. The man who had lied to me every day for 4 years. The man who had made me feel foolish and blind and small. Then I picked up his passport from the nightstand, his wallet, his phone. I put them into my suitcase. I packed my own things carefully and slowly. By the time I was done, the room looked almost untouched except for Adrian, asleep in the middle of the bed. I left a note on the dresser. "I know about Melissa. I know about Ethan. Enjoy explaining this one." Then I walked out. The hotel lobby was silent except for the night clerk at the desk. I checked out using my own card. Outside, the air was cool. I got into a taxi and gave the driver the name of the airport. Halfway there, my hands started shaking. Not because I regretted it, because for the first time in weeks, I finally felt free. The next 24 hours were chaos. My phone exploded with missed calls and messages from unknown numbers. The first one came from the hotel. "Mrs. Mercer, your husband says his belongings are missing." "I'm sure they are," I said, and hung up. Then came calls from Adrian using borrowed phones. Voicemails, text messages. "Please answer. What are you doing? Where are you? This isn't funny. You can't leave me here. We need to talk." By the end of the day, the messages turned angry. "You've lost your mind. You know how much trouble I'm in? I can't even get on a plane." Then desperate, "Please. Please just send my passport. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But the thing about apologies is that they only matter when they come before the betrayal, not after. I blocked every number. When I got home, the apartment felt strangely unfamiliar. I walked through the room slowly. His shoes by the door, his jacket hanging in the closet, his toothbrush in the bathroom. All the evidence of a life I no longer wanted. I spent the next 3 days packing up his things. I mailed the passport and wallet directly to the American embassy in Morocco with a note explaining where he was staying. I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I just wanted him to sit with the consequences for a while, to feel trapped, to feel abandoned, to feel confused, to know what it was like to have the ground disappear beneath him. Then I called a lawyer. Apparently, having proof that your husband secretly fathered a child with another woman makes the divorce process move surprisingly quickly. A week later, Adrian finally made it back home. I was at the apartment when he arrived. He looked terrible. Wrinkled clothes, unshaven face, dark circles under his eyes. For a second, we just staring at each other. Then he said, "How could you do that to me?" I almost laughed. "How could I do that to you? You left me stranded in another country. You had another family." His mouth opened, then closed. "It wasn't like that," he said weakly. "Then what was it like, Adrian?" He looked away. "I was going to tell you. When? Before or after your son graduated college." He winced. "I never stopped loving you. You don't get to say that. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is buying the wrong cereal. You built an entirely separate life behind my back." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I didn't know how to fix it. You could have started by telling the truth." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I handed him an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers. He stared at them in silence. "You already filed?" "Yes." "So that's it?" I looked at him, at the man I had loved, at the stranger standing in my apartment. "Yes," I said. "That's it." He left an hour later. I never saw him again. Months passed. Then a year. I sold the apartment and moved to Boston. I changed jobs. I cut my hair. I bought furniture Adrian would have hated. Little by little, I rebuilt my life. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, leaving him in Morocco, making him panic, making him figure out how to get home on his own. The truth is, no, I don't. Because for 4 years, Adrian left me stranded too, not in another country, in a marriage that was never real. And unlike him, I only lied once.